the FBI showed up at my house one day. It was early morning. I answered the door in my bathrobe. There's police everywhere. There's probably 30 armed agents that had the entire house surrounded with assault rifles pointed at me. There was some guy with a battering ram, obviously a guy with a megaphone yelling at me.
Without any warning?
No. In fact, the lawyers were, I asked the lawyers, is the police ever going to show up at the house? And they said, almost certainly not. We're cooperating with them. We're giving them everything they want. You're answering all their questions. We don't expect that to happen. But they did. They were there. They seized my cell phone and Michelle's cell phone.
They came with a battering ram and automatic rifles to take your cell phones.
Yeah, a lot of cruiser. I mean, it was really nuts. And then they held us in the car as all the school buses went by, which was infuriating.
So the FBI shows up at your house rather than just calling your lawyer and saying, hey, we know you've imaged your cell phones already at the expense of $200,000. We'd like physical possession of your cell phones. They show up with multiple cruisers, automatic weapons, a battering ram. You're at home with your child, I think, and your pets.
This is pre-child at this point.
It's pre-child?
So, yeah,
Okay.
Just pregnant girlfriend.
Great, perfect. And they show up and then throw you in a cruiser?
Yeah, they held us in the cruiser for a while. They were very upset. We'd brought our cell phones out with us. I think they had this grand image of like trashing my house, I think is what a lot of these guys wanted to do. They certainly wanted to enter the house. I could hear them discussing. They were upset they couldn't enter the house.
These FBI employees?
Yeah. We had our phones with us when we went outside, so they had no justification to enter the house anymore. So they held us in the cruiser for a while. I could hear some back and forth about being upset they couldn't go in the house. All the school buses are coming by, which was unfortunate. And then once the school buses were done, they let us go back inside the house. And it's scary. I mean, being without your cell phone all of a sudden is hard. There's people trying to get in touch with you. We get in touch with the lawyers and things like that. So, you got to run down to the store, buy a new cell phone. But it was the government sending a message, we don't believe you. We have a different narrative and, you're facing the government right now. So get in line.
But again, the only purpose of sending guys with automatic rifles and a battering ram is to intimidate you.
Correct.
You're an American citizen. And
that and embarrass you. I mean, the neighbors see it's loud.
But treat you like garbage. You've not been convicted of anything.
Not only that, but I thought into that moment we were being very cooperative. I mean, I had, there's this sort of narrative out there that I refused to cooperate with the DOJ. I wasn't giving them what they wanted. That's not true. I immediately cooperated. I replied to the Bahamian government when they emailed me, and I was offering the DOJ what I had. I don't think what I had jives with their story of how things were and the narrative that they were able to create. And so they weren't, they allude to, and they're very careful with it. So I don't want to accuse them of being, well, not accused, but like they're not outward with this, but through the proffering, you can kind of tell what you're able to say that would help you save yourself a little bit more. They don't tell you directly, but it's, describe this campaign finance in a different way, or, how does this reconcile? They sort of tell you their narrative through the questioning, and it's your decision if you play ball or not. And I just decided I wasn't going to lie to the government to save myself, like I feel some other people have in this situation. So,
who?
I don't think. Well, look, I know Nishad did not think he was committing campaign finance fraud. I know that for a fact. The idea that people worth hundreds of millions to billions of dollars can be straw donors just doesn't even cross your mind. I had when Michelle ran for Congress, I had foreign people that would text me and say, hey, I'll send you $50. You can put it in her campaign. And I reply, no, that's illegal. We can't take foreign money. I appreciate the offer. Or even, U.S. people would be like, hey, I'll just Venmo it. You can put it in. No, you can't do that.
You're speaking of the mother of your child who ran for Congress.
Yes, correct.
In New York.
Yeah.
Didn't win and is now in trouble for taking money from you or something, unclear exactly.
Correct. For us having commingled finances.
Right.
And her work for FTX not being real. Yeah.
Yeah. So
where was I before that? Sorry,
I just have to point out that Again, I wouldn't be saying any of this if you had even been accused of participating in the core fraud here, but you haven't been even accused of that. So by the government. So, but you did give to Republican candidates.
Yes, and I was associated with FTX.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people were who haven't been indicted. I mean,
right.
In our system, I don't know if you know this, but the people who commit the crimes get indicted. The people who haven't committed the crimes don't get indicted. That's the promise of the system.
I'm not sure I believe that.
Well, I don't either.
So,
that's why this is a fast-ending interview. But I used to believe that. Did you believe that?
Yeah, I held up right until very recently believing that. I even tried. I'm not a victim. I will never be a victim. I don't consider myself a victim. I chose to listen to the lawyers. I made the decisions that I got. And so I don't want this narrative to be that I feel like I'm a victim of something. And I go out of my way to make sure I don't have that feeling. So I constantly try to spin it in my head to make it more the narrative events that I know isn't true, but I'm constantly trying to get there to make this all make sense. So, I had a lot of faith. I don't dislike the legal system or have that strong of issues with it until I sort of saw what I saw, and saw how it plays out. I mean,
well, I think you're taking the right tack emotionally. I think it's very destructive to think of yourself as a victim. I think the Democratic Party destroys millions of lives by encouraging Americans in certain groups to think of themselves as victims. I agree with you 100%. But as a factual matter, you are a victim because the crimes to which you pled guilty are not crimes. From my read of it, I don't understand how those are crimes. It doesn't make any sense at all. If you're borrowing against your own assets and then you take that, which every rich person in the world who's invested in low basis equities, for example, does,
yep.
Then every person, that money that you get from that loan or any loan is yours. It's yours. And if you donate some of that to political candidates, you're not a straw donor for the person who loaned you the money. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, I agree. I think
so. You are a victim in that sense. That's like not a crime, and to construe that as a crime is like itself a miscarriage of justice, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think it says a lot of why there was an inducement, right? There's no need to make an inducement to get someone to plea if you have a good case or if they're guilty, right? You only bring up an inducement because that this person's not believing or getting to the same place you want them to get to.
Right. So they threaten your family.
It's more common than you'd think.
Oh, I know.
The Varsity Blues case, and a lot of the reality is people don't have sympathy for wealthy people, right? Which is fair. I'm not arguing. There's plenty of people to have sympathy for. And so when there's a misjustice to someone with money, a lot of the world's just like,
well, I am a wealthy person, I guess, relatively speaking, and I intensely dislike rich people, even though, I've been one my whole life, really. But yeah, I dislike them a lot because I think they've been terrible leaders of our country. And I also I just don't like them personally. So I get it. I absolutely understand that bias, that bigotry. But the system itself should guard itself from bias and bigotry. Just because you don't like black people, does that mean every accused black person should go to prison? No, of course not. That's horrible. It's immoral.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's true for any group. You assess the crime on its own terms. Is this actually a crime? Did the person actually commit the crime? And what's the appropriate punishment for committing that crime? Like, those are the only questions that matter. It doesn't matter what group you're from, right?
Yeah, that's how you'd expect the legal system to work, I think. But it's clear as day that's not how it works.
If they told you that because you're white and straight that you can't get a fair trial, like, don't we have a civil rights division at the Justice Department? I mean, that's the problem. It would be like, well, you're black, you can't get a fair trial. Well, okay, we have a federal government to fix that. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I mean, you're obviously much more balanced psychologically, but I'm outraged on your
behavior. You go crazy if not.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.